I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. We're on a mission to revamp society by amplifying your humanity. This week on the show,
my name is Susan Ruth. I am a human. I operate in the world as a part of the whole. I'm stepping into that next phase. I have lived my life telling stories.
Susan Ruth began her career as a performing artist and songwriter in Seattle, Washington, where she garnered multiple performance and writing awards for her albums How to Say Goodbye and Surfacing to Breathe. And she served on the NARAS Board of Governors as Songwriter Governor. In 2006, she moved to Nashville, Tennessee, penning songs in multiple genres, including pop, country, rock, AC, and Eurodance for artists such as Reba, Lone Star, Erdem Kene, O'Shea, and The United, among others. In 2014, she released her album All I Ever Wanted Was Everything. Susan's songs have been featured in motion pictures, including Life on the Line and Afterlife, as well as MTV's Road Rules and Real World. In July of 2016, Susan founded and began hosting the human interest, purpose-driven Hey Human podcast. Her podcast has since gained momentum and worldwide attention for its open-minded conversations ranging in topics from science, technology, religion, art, economics, and politics to humanism, philosophy, gender, and race. In 2018, Susan received the 2018 Valerie J. Hoffman Award for her work with the show. She's also an accomplished abstract painter. A recent graduate of the acclaimed conservatory program at the Second City in Los Angeles, Susan is currently writing sketch comedy as well as feature film in comedy and thriller genres. Susan has paneled on topics of creativity, crowdfunding, empowerment, communication, independent music, story, humanism, adversity, and finding one's voice for organizations or projects such as Act Like a Girl, New Millennium Music Conference, Fem Music, Union College, the Seattle Film Summit, the Tennessee Higher Education Initiative, Music Cares, RAD, Pujol's Family Foundation, and Sunrise Children Services. So impressive. While Susan has a presence in Nashville, she's currently living in Los Angeles, and I cannot wait for you to hear from her. Support this show by purchasing from our new line of merch at humanamplified.com. With a nod to 90s nostalgia and a focus on elements of our laughing skull, this first batch of designs celebrates the release of the Human Amplified Podcast Season 3, running from January to May of 2021, with new episodes dropping weekly on Tuesdays. From mugs to hats to shirts, stickers, and premium adjustable face masks, you'll be able to practically incorporate a piece of unique, gritty artwork into your everyday life. All artwork was designed by me, Brandy, with you in mind. I got super picky and tested out each product, too. I can say with certainty that I love the quality, available colors, comfort, sizes, cuts, and details, down to every last stitch of embroidery.
My name is Susan Ruth. I am a human. I raised up in Seattle, greater Seattle area, lived in Nashville for 13 years, do work all over, everywhere, travel all over the place, although a little more tough right now. Los Angeles and Nashville are my two stomping grounds. I am a professional songwriter, an abstract painter, a podcaster, Hey Human Podcast, a writer of essay and poetry, but I do comedy writing. I just finished Conservatory 1 through 5 at the Second City, which is really exciting. And I'm dipping my toe in acting, and certainly I'm a producer of film, TV, that kind of thing. I'm stepping into that next phase, not leaving any of the other phases behind, but carrying all this luggage with me moving forward.
Yeah. What does that next phase look like for you?
Film and television. Finishing up a screenplay. I've got a couple television shows in in the works and development, partnering with a fantastic woman, Jessica Walter, and she and we are attacking this together. It's very exciting. It's a little bit still on the lid, so but certainly everyone will know when we're ready to step into those roles officially with the money behind us and how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
But certainly the creative part is ongoing. The writing of the projects is happening now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's all very cool. And I feel like you have such a rich, interesting, creative life. I would love it for our listeners to just get to know you. So I'd like to do like a quick 10-question rapid fire.
Let's do it.
Okay. First question, favorite movie?
Oh, God. Princess Bride comes to mind.
Favorite song?
Impossible, but the first song that popped in my head was The River, Joni Mitchell.
Okay. Biggest hot topic issue that gets you worked up?
Presidency.
Biggest driving pet peeve?
Driving
Pet peeve.
Rude drivers who speed up when you're trying to get in a lane when they clearly weren't trying to be there in the first place. I think that's rude.
Yes. Cats or dogs?
Dogs, but I like cats too, but dogs and bats and jellyfish.
Ooh.
And lions.
How tall are you?
A little under 6'1". Giant.
Indoors or outdoors?
Oh, both. Can't answer.
Okay.
Depends.
Best instrument to play?
I wish I was better at it, but the piano. Although I play both guitar and piano, sort of not great. Good enough for government work, as they say. But I wish I was sensational on the piano. That would be incredible.
Best city you've lived in?
Los Angeles, I really love. But New York is super fun, and Chicago is the greatest city in the world if it didn't have a winter that was 10 months long. I'm answering far too many answers for each question, but what are you going to do,
That's totally okay.
Oh, and Santorini, Greece is the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life, and I've been a lot of places, but it's like a movie set. It's so sensationally beautiful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Favorite food?
I love Thai food, honestly. So good. It's like a hug from the inside.
That's awesome. All right. So now I just want to jump into the fact that, to me, you're an example of an amplified human, like somebody who's not afraid to put yourself out there. So what advice would you have for our listeners about being seen and heard in general?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you. That's a very nice compliment. For me, the biggest thing is take the leap, because the worst anyone can tell you is no. And that's really not that traumatic, honestly. I've received far more no's than yeses in my life, but you have to just keep picking yourself up. I've had some really terrible things happen, financial things, people stabbing me in the back, all the things that would come along with being out in the world. And the trick is, of course, to know that that's not on you, that's on them. And the biggest thing is I have had so many people try to tell me how to do things, how I should be with my songwriting, how I should be with my publishing, how I should, oh, well, you don't know this, so you can't do this. All those things belong to the people saying them. They don't belong to me. I say this all the time. You are the master of you, not your parents, not your lovers, not your friends, not your siblings, no, not your boss. You get to decide what is right for you. You have full dominion, and nobody gets to write your story. You're writing it. You're the author of you. To me, that's the biggest thing.
That's awesome. I love that. It sort of gave me chills. I'm like, yeah.
Okay. It must be true. I always say that if you get the chills, that means it's true.
Yeah. So speaking of being heard, I recently saw a video you posted of going through your past life regression, and I thought it was so interesting what you said about being heard. Can you sort of recount that for us a little bit and just tell us how that was for you?
So the past life regression was such a trip. Rachel Kais did it, and she's sensational. I didn't really know what to expect. I've done it now with her a couple times, both on Zoom and in real life. And, she's not telling you where to go. You're telling her all the places you're seeing and doing. And in that particular instance that you're talking about, I saw myself as this little girl, and I knew that because I was a girl and the village was full of people that were more important than I, and it made me very sad. I felt like I had things to say and stories to tell and ideas, like most 13-year-olds, the wealth of information and creativity. And I knew that nobody would listen to me, and it made me so sad. And it was wild because my me self sitting in this room doing this experience was crying because I was feeling this sadness of this little girl. It didn't belong to me, it belonged to her, but I knew that she was me. It was really a trip. But I think it's such a good example of, I have lived my life telling stories. I tell my stories, whether it's in conversation or at dinner parties or in the paintings I paint or the songs I write, or now the scripts I write, or even in the performances when I do improv, you're telling a story. And in this world, it seems like the art of speaking is a lost art. The art of storytelling is close to being a lost art. Every time we lose an old person, we lose all those stories, right? Mm-hmm. So with the podcast, that's why I love recording other people's stories. I think it's so important. So I can see why that little girl, it's interesting that somewhere in a land far, far away, when I was this little girl in this village whose life was cut short, that I wanted to tell stories. And now I'm still wanting to tell stories.
Yeah.
I suppose there is a lifetime's thread for everything.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, it does. And what's interesting about it is in that life, you weren't being heard, but now you are. What do you think about that?
I suppose that's growth or stepping into one's power. I'm sure a lot of teenagers feel just that they don't have power and they don't have dominion. And that really starts from such a young age, like go hug your Uncle Bob or go do this thing that you don't want to do. And the dominion of your own body is taken from you, right?
Oh, yeah.
On a lot of levels. And they seem innocuous and no big deal. But I think that does set a precedent to feel like I have to do what other people tell me because that's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. And so you're already kind of shut down. And I think teenagers a lot of times do feel that feeling of nobody's listening to them. They're not being heard. And what a wealth of knowledge. And if you don't think that young people have that ability, then just type into Google young inventors and have your hair blown back by how amazing it is, right? Or storytellers or philanthropists, 11-year-old philanthropists and stuff. So I have this thing about little young kids and old people. It's just such a wealth of information and power that is largely ignored. We're scared of old people because we don't want to grow old, and we don't give young people a voice because we don't think that they have something of value to share. Such a bummer.
Oh, yeah. That's true. And I wonder if that's because once we become an adult, do you think we forget that we had that information when we were that age, or we just don't trust it, or it's conditioned out of us? I mean, why do you think that is?
I'm going to go with yes for all of that.
Okay.
Exactly what you just said, conditioned out of us because of a lifetime of not being heard. We think that our voice doesn't matter for certain gender or sexuality or groups, they're told their voice doesn't matter. There's so many levels to it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I say fight back. Speak up.
Yeah.
Speak up, speak out.
Yeah. Hey, so what would you say is the most powerful thing you've ever created?
This podcast, Hey Human podcast.
Okay.
I've written songs that I really am proud of and that have been cut by artists, or some that just sit in a pile collecting dust that will maybe never be recorded. But I'm glad that they entered into the sphere of being instead of unbeing. But the podcast, that body of work, I'm really proud of it. I'm really, really proud of it. And, it had a learning curve. When I started it, it's 4.5 years old now. When I started it, I didn't know what I was doing. I just jumped in.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about sound equipment. I didn't know anything about the recording process of that. I mean, I knew how to record a song, but I just kept with it, and I pushed through it. And you can hear in the first year that the content's there, but the sound quality might not be there. But I kept going because that's what you do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I learned, and I'm so proud of that show.
Awesome.
You know, and I keep doing it, and it keeps expanding, and it's exciting, you know, because you have a podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's talk about Hey Human for a minute. Why did you start it, and what has kept you going for those 4 years? Which, I mean, I think that's really impressive because it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It came to be, and I've told this story a few times, so people forgive me if you've heard it, but I was driving. I was in Nashville. I was driving, and one of the big shootings happened. I think it was the Pulse nightclub because it fits up with the timeline of when I started the show. But there were so many of these types of shootings that it's hard to keep track of everything.
Yeah.
But I was on the phone with my dad, with my parents there in Seattle, and I was crying. I was sobbing, really. I was almost hysterical, and I couldn't understand how it was that humans treat each other like that. Like, where's the disconnect that I can look at you and see something so either abhorrent or different that I'm willing to take your life for it? It's mind-boggling to me and so sad. And I was crying, and my dad was trying to calm me down. And I said, I'm starting to give up on humanity. I don't know what to do. We've lost our way so much. And he said, you have to look for the good. You can't give up. You have to. I'm sure I scared him because I was like, there's nothing worth living for. You know, I was very dramatic. But rightly so. I mean, there was a great loss of life, you know, and I went home and I thought about it. I had this really intense experience at the grocery store, which was where I was headed. And it reminded me how beautiful people are. And I got home. It was like a kiss from God for a second, you know, if you believe in those kinds of things, that in my sorrow, it actually chokes me up thinking about it. In my sorrow, I was reminded that no, in fact, there is much more beauty than darkness. And you just have to remember that. And I went home and I thought about how I could show humanity that we're all connected somehow, even in our most different, even in our worst. And that's when this was born. Hey Human was born.
Awesome.
Yeah.
A mass shooting also inspired me to start a podcast.
Oh my gosh.
It was the one in Vegas, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it totally makes sense to me. But what was your grocery store experience? What was that kiss from God?
I was sobbing still when I walked in the store, and I had to keep it together because, you know, got to go into Kroger. And I was just picking up a few things for dinner. And I got a box of macaroni and cheese, a sweet potato, and I think like a kombucha or something. And I got into the checkout line, and there was a guy in front of me, this older black guy. And when I say older, I mean, he probably was pushing 80, you know? And and I had a thing of tuna fish, a packet of tuna fish. And he looks at my little pile, he looks at me and he smiles and he says, is that for dinner? And I said, yeah. And he said, sweet potato, huh? And I was like, yeah. He said, I love sweet potatoes. And I said, I love them too. And there was something in his eyes. And then he looked at me and he said, it's going to be all right, sister. It's going to be all right. Which makes me want to cry right now.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him. It was like he saw right through. And I had, you know, calmed down by the time I was walking through the store. So, I mean, maybe I was a little blotchy faced, but there was just this moment, you know, it was beautiful.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the thing. I think we are so hurried and rushed, and we forget to look each other in the eye. And what I mean by that is to feel empathy, you know,
Yeah.
looking at another person and seeing our whole lives intertwined, really. Yeah.
So in doing your podcast, have you found any answers over the course of the last 4 years in regards to the disconnect? I mean, what's going on?
Listening. That's pretty much the bottom line.
Okay.
I think people are waiting for their turn to talk. And I think that there's a lot of people that feel they don't know how to touch their own pain. And since they can't touch their own pain, they lash out at others. And I think when people are waiting to be able to say something instead of listening, there's a lot lost in translation. So through this podcast, I've certainly developed better listening skills, but I've also realized that no matter how different one of my guests might be from myself, that I see myself in them in some way or another.
Yeah.
Look, there are a lot of roads to take, and we go toward the places where we feel loved and accepted and needed. And for a lot of us, those might be dark places, because even in darkness, we might find connection.
Okay.
So I'm trying to shine some light in those places.
You've had over 200 guests. What episode are you on now?
I feel like this week is going to be about 230. I don't know, 232, somewhere in there. I'm
Okay.
pushing in that direction.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 232. That seems right.
Well, and by the time this airs, you'll be even further along for sure. But out of all of those guests, could you put a finger on one who has left the biggest impression in your own life?
You know, I interviewed a Grand Dragon in the KKK. It was in the very beginning of the show.
Oh, damn.
It's episode 30.
Okay.
And I went to his house and I was really nervous. And everyone around me thought I was an insane person. And what was really interesting is that I listened to what he had to say. I allowed for the space, but as I held my ground, because I know who I am, I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to say, you can't say that, or that's insane, or I just asked questions. Well, why? Why do you think that way? Where do you think that comes from? How do you feel about that? And then I would offer up scenarios. Like, what if this happened? Or did you know about this? You know, and in the beginning of the episode, he's very N-word. And by the end, he's completely stopped saying that. And he says African American, which I thought was an interesting change. But what was even more fascinating was a couple weeks after that, he sent me this email. And it was a list of Black inventors. And he said, this can't possibly be real, right? I mean, because, you know, he's super racist. And I said, well, just by eyeballing this, a couple of these for sure. I said, but you know what? Let me just research it. I didn't say, of course it's real, you know. I said, I'm going to research it and I'll get back to you. For whatever reason, he trusted me. He said, I don't trust the internet, but you're going to tell me the truth kind of feeling, you know. So I wrote up, there was, I can't remember now, like 10, 15, 20 people on this list. And I wrote up a little synopsis of every single person, of either whether they reinvented the wheel and made it better, or if they came up with something completely on their own. And I wrote it all out. I said why, like, for example, the woman who invented a certain type of laser eye surgery was because her mom was going blind. Or the guy that invented the first stoplight, you know, out of necessity, you know, all these things, really wonderful contributions to society. And I sent it to him and he responded with just 3 words. He said, that's so cool.
Okay.
So this person who thought that there was no way anyone of color could invent, create, be a, you know what I mean? Suddenly is now like, oh, wait, there's something there. And I think that turn and that tiny little bit of growth was because of that conversation, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody, like, I had bona fide arguments with my friends about interviewing him, saying, you can't give him a voice. I said, I'm not giving him a voice. I'm shining a light on him. Because I would argue that everyone, and I talk about this in the preamble of the show, is like, I think everyone has racism. We all are guilty of it. Whether it's holding our purse a little closer when someone, you know, is walking by us, or whatever it is, everybody's got it. And here's the thing that was really interesting too, is one of my best friends called me up after the show aired and she said, I've got some soul searching to do. And this was one of my friends who was like, I'm not racist. Everybody's not racist. I said, I don't agree. And I'm going to show you why. And the other thing too is that we want to put all of our monsters in closets and back corners and shadow places. And there are neighbors and our grocery store clerks and our uncles and our aunts and our parents and our sisters. You know what I mean? These are not this behavior, as we now can see years later. It's everyday people feel this way.
Yeah.
So my friend called me up after it aired, and she said, I have some soul searching to do. And I said, why is that? And she said, because he said a couple things that I've thought myself. And I thought, oh my God, I've thought the same things that a Grand Dragon and the KKK has thought. And I said, right there is why I did the episode.
Wow. That's mind-boggling. But yeah. So I really love what you said about how you're shining a light on certain issues, because I've oftentimes, wondered, oh, should I edit this out? Should I not air something that I just vehemently disagree with? And, at the end of the day, I've aired the stuff because I was like, no, I'm going to go ahead and air it. But it's so difficult to make those decisions. So that's awesome. And it's inspirational. So
I made that decision. That's the reason why I don't do ads on my show too, which I don't begrudge anyone making money off of their thing. That's fine. But I didn't want to be beholden to any advertiser saying, oh, you can't do that, or you have to pull this, or we'll pull sponsorship. Everything I do is donation based. So, or if people want to buy merch or something, that's great too. But I don't do ads because I just don't want to have to answer to anybody. And I think that these conversations are hard, but they have to be talked about. Otherwise, people just happily, blithely go along with the idea that that doesn't happen anymore, or that's not a thing anymore. It's really easy to feel that way when you're not in the group, whichever group it is. Like men are like, I don't mansplain, and every woman's like, I'm sorry, what? People of color are like, racism's a thing, and white people are like, I'm not racist. Racism isn't a thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's important to shine a light on all of it.
Yeah.
My foibles too. I mean, I've not known things, and I've said things. I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's not right, not in a racist way, but just in I don't know things, I'm not trying to be smarter than my guests.
Right.
I want to learn along with everybody listening too. I do know some stuff, which makes it easier to have conversations, but I'm not trying to outsmart anyone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's awesome. Let's shift gears into singing and songwriting for a little bit. Just can you describe what being a singer-songwriter living in Nashville is like, and how is that different from LA?
Firstly, I have to say Nashville is a master class. I will say it until I drop dead. It's a master class in songwriting.
Okay.
If anybody wants to learn the craft of songwriting, that's the place to do it. Now, the landscape has changed over the decade that I, have been writing there. But it's definitely, it's the best songwriters in the world are there, and Sweden. Not to say they're not in other places too, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's really just perseverance. I'm not going to lie. It's hard. It's hard to not give up. It has to be in every essence of your being. I've had friends quit, and I've said, how did you do that? What is your secret? Mm-hmm. This is brutal. You could liken professional songwriting as being an abusive relationship. Just when it's pummeled you to, near exhaustion and almost death, then it brings you flowers and candy and says, oh, you got to cut, or, oh, this big, huge writer wants to write with you. And then you're like, oh, okay, I'm back in the ring, mm-hmm. hit me again. So that's sort of weird, but I would say that any creative experiences that in any field. And to some extent, I'm sure it happens in the business world as well. I can't imagine Wall Street as a walk in the park. Mm-hmm. I don't know that there's a difference between that. Everyone brings their own experience to the table. So for me to have the difference between Nashville and LA, I love Los Angeles. I love the vibe. I love the weather. I love the creativity. I feel like Nashville is more of, we do this one thing. There's other music that's on the fringe, but really it's a country music town. There's no better songwriting lesson than learning to write an excellent country song, because it's very specific. It's a tight 3.5 minute, 3 minute movie. At least It was. I think now pop has influenced it so much. It's kind of changed a little bit, but for the most part, I would say that still rings true. And in Los Angeles, you can write anything. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I've gone into rooms here and written little ditties. I've written pop stuff. I've written rock stuff. I've written what would be considered emo, I guess, if that was still a thing. So yeah, I think there's less limitation perhaps. But to that end, when I was in Nashville, I wrote what I felt.
Mm-hmm.
I tried writing what I didn't feel to fit into the mold, and I was not happy.
Ah.
And then I stopped doing that. I did that sort of at the beginning. I think that's a process that people go through. They get to Nashville, they have a certain style and a certain sound, and then they learn very quickly that Nashville has a particular desire of you, a want of you, and you try and adhere to that. And then you go and you crank out some crap. And then you walk through that fire and come out the other end and go, you know what, I'm going to take the things I've learned, but put it to who I am.
Okay.
And then the quality of song goes back up again. I feel like maybe everyone in Nashville has that year or two of learning what Nashville is, of crap, having not great songs because you think you're trying to be something and it comes off as disingenuous. And the one thing I say all the time about songwriting is be truthful. Just be truthful. Because people know when you're faking it.
Okay. So it is possible to still be yourself and fit that into what Nashville's looking for?
I say yes, but that's my personality. It may not work for other people, but I say yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And some people really in Nashville do it, the Nashville sound, like a Luke Laird, for example. He figured it out really quickly and can crank it out. But also, he has the benefit of being Luke Laird, so it doesn't matter what he puts out. Or an Ashley Gorley, or, some people just sort of, once they've reached a level of success, and I would say that for any artist or writer, but then they get to just kind of do their thing and nobody really thinks twice because it's them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Was songwriting like your first creative love?
Singing was first.
Singing. Okay.
And poetry. Yeah, but singing for sure. I didn't start painting till late in life.
Oh, okay. Well, so it was like a natural evolution of just things you were adding into your creative
Correct.
belt, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Although they're all connected.
Yeah. Let's talk about your fine art for a minute, the painting. How is that process different for you than from creating music? Or if it's not, how is it related? I mean, what is that relationship like?
Yeah, for me, it's a good question. For me, the structure of songwriting has more of a regimented flow to it. I have an understanding of the rules. You have to know the rules so you can break them, obviously, but I have an understanding of a structure and the rules when I'm going in. And I'm primarily a lyricist and a melody writer. As I said before, I can play guitar and piano, but people may throw fruit and vegetables at me. So I try and leave that to the big people that know how to play their instruments better. And I love words. That's my forte. With painting, I have zero expectation. I go in with a blank canvas. I didn't study art. I didn't get an MFA or anything like that. I look at my canvas and I just start putting paint on it. And eventually I start seeing things and those things turn into what the final project is. But unlike, I think for a lot of painters, they do smaller paintings, an idea, and then they make it a little bit bigger and, they suss it out and they figure it out. I don't know if abstractists do that as much, but I know realists do. But I do not. I just kind of go for it. And it's very freeing. I check my brain at the door. I think all humans have a natural understanding of light and color, unless maybe they're colorblind, and then that's a whole other thing. But knowing that, the sky is up and the ground is down, and what colors naturally work well or are dissonant. Like in music, when something is dissonant, it's still pleasing for some weird reason. It's the reason why ASMR videos are so popular, So there's that sort of dissonance in art as well. I just kind of go for it. That's a very long-winded answer to your question, but
no, that's totally good. So, I mean, like when you're writing a song, do you just go for it, or do you like have something in mind that you're going to build out first?
In Los Angeles, I would say it's a go for it. In Nashville, it's a something in mind.
Okay.
In Nashville, when I walk in a room, I have titles, I have song ideas, I may have portions of songs. And in Los Angeles, it may just be that might be the case, but more than not, it's a let's just see what happens kind of thing. In my experience, I don't know that that's everyone's experience, but that's mine.
Sure. So you're able to adapt basically pretty easily.
Yeah, it's certainly a chameleon. And I've written songs. I've had cuts in lots of different genres: pop, R&B, rock, Americana, country, obviously. And so I haven't ever had a rap cut, and I haven't ever had like a true blues cut. I've done R&B, but yeah.
Okay.
And I've never written an opera, but I love opera.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to shift gears again. I saw your post the other day about all these statistics and things that people don't think about with COVID-19. And it looked like that you got it back before we knew it was even here. Yeah. So would you be interested in talking about that and telling us about your experience?
Sure. I spiked a super high fever. I threw up all day long, and the fever went away. It came out of nowhere. And then I slept 8 days straight, no food, barely drinking. My roommate went and got Gatorade, and I kind of sipped on that a little bit. But really, I've never slept so much in my life. I couldn't get up out of bed.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of lifted. I was able to eat a little something about 8 or 9 days out, but I was still so tired. And the tiredness lasted for another week or two. I ended up with 2 spikings of fever in that initial 8 days. So I had one spike, and then it went away. And then like a couple days later, it spiked again, just out of nowhere. But what's weird is that, when I'm sick, and I had the swine flu in Nashville, and like way back in 2007.
Okay.
And even at my sickest then, I was still like walking around the house. I mean, I was miserable, but I was up and around and stuff. I couldn't even like watch TV. I luckily had a podcast episode in the queue so that I could just post that. But that took all my energy to even do that little bit of work.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
Man, how did you even know that you had it?
I didn't then.
Okay.
I didn't then. Yeah. I don't think anybody. And I talked to more people. Places like New York and Los Angeles, I think it started coming through in September last year.
Oh, wow. Did your roommate end up getting it?
She got hit worse. She was so sick, and she was down for quite a long time, and took a long time to get rid of the cough afterward. And I mean, I'm not kidding. When I was like, I was throwing up, I basically opened my door. I said, stay away from me. I never opened my door again other than to get the Gatorade. She left at my door.
Wow.
But I never went into the rest of the house. I stayed in my room the whole time. I never got out of my bed.
Was there ever a moment when you were like,
I'm going to die?
I need to go to the hospital? Yeah.
I did. I did think that a couple times, but like most of us, I was stubborn. I was like, I'll just wait it out another. And, here's the interesting thing is they say that now they know to get people to sleep on their stomachs in the hospital, but that's a natural sleep for me. So I was sleeping on my stomach the whole time. So between that and just sleeping straight and maybe in a way not knowing at the time, I think your brain, if it doesn't know you might have contracted a deadly disease, is not going to have that mindset. Yeah. And if you have the mindset, like, I'm just going to get through this, you get through it. That's, of course, very layman's terms way of putting it, but I do think mind over matter sometimes.
Yeah. There's
a great book called Healing in the Mind from way back when that talks about that stuff a lot, about the positive attitude really helps a great deal. I am dealing with lung issues. They are getting better, but man, it felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest for 6 months, and now it's where I was having to do 8, 9, 10 puffs on my inhaler that they prescribed to deal with it, versus now I think I'm down to, if I'm lucky, 4 puffs a day. And some days I'm able to go without it at all, which is great. But I never in my life, I would run and I could run upstairs, and I was having issues, especially back in like March, where walking up the stairs was winding me. I'm fit. That's not normal for me.
Oh, okay. And so you weren't on an inhaler before, right? And now it's just like a thing you have to do.
Yes.
Does that impact your singing?
Yeah, I wasn't able to sing this whole time. It's just now coming back, which was kind of scary. I was like, well, I guess my singing career's over.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, where can people find all of your stuff?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so many places. HeyHumanPodcast.com is on all the podcast places. Obviously, I just said a website, so it's there too. HeyHumanPodcast.com. Hey Human Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And then my personal Susan Ruthism, SUSANRUTHISM, is on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. I try to keep all the content different on all of these different platforms. On my Facebook, I try and do a lot of arts and science and interesting people things. And then on Hey Human, I focus mostly on interesting people things. And then on Hey Human's Instagram, on the Hey Human Podcast Instagram, I try and focus on people in history, or if somebody wins a Nobel Prize, that's especially a woman, because I think it's important to be like, guess what? Women are smart too.
Yeah.
Surprise. And then on Twitter, I'm more political. So, as is per the Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah. But those are, and then SusanRuth.com, SUSANRUTH. SusanRuth.com is music, art, and acting stuff. And then on iTunes, you can find my music, and on Spotify. But iTunes is better because you might actually download the whole album. And that's under Susan Ruth. You can really find me all over the place if you Google me, I suppose.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can people buy your artwork?
Yes, 100%. If you go to SusanRuth.com, you can see a whole lot of my artwork there. I'm not great about always posting stuff up, but certainly. And I post on the socials here and there for newer pieces. But yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to me. info@SusanRuth.com will find me. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure for you, just having you on the show. And
it has been a pleasure for me. You're right.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
I've enjoyed it too as well. Thank you. And thanks for asking me. I mean, that tickles me. I think, I'm just in my little corner doing my little thing, but it's always fun when somebody says, hey, I notice you. It's cool.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and learn more at humanamplified.com.